for registering for today's webinar to review the Salesforce Lightning Update, AscendixRE updates, and our new data enrichment application, which is called DataAM. You're all on mute, so please use the Q&A portion of GoToWebinar to ask any questions, and we will address them anonymously at the end of the call. My name is Camille Music, and so I'll be the one addressing your questions via private message. I'll take down them, and again, we'll make sure to cover them at the end. So again, since we have so much and a little bit of time to cover, I'm going to hand it right over to Wes.
Great. Thanks, Camille, and I appreciate everybody's attendance here. We're very excited about what we're conveying today, and I'm going to be very short on PowerPoint slides and get right into the content. So let's do that. Now, let me get out of the slideshow mode here and get into the product offering. So we're talking about two things in particular: Salesforce Lightning, what that means to you as end users, and what the experience is, as well as some of the advances that we've made in AscendixRE on top of the Salesforce Lightning platform. So let's get into it. So what you see here on the screen is the new form, and this is a contact form, the form layout from all the major objects that are in the Salesforce platform going forward. For those of you who are used to the classic version of Salesforce, which has been in existence since the day that Salesforce opened their doors, this is, I hope, a welcome change in terms of ease of use and navigation and just general approachability of the UI or user interface. So let's walk through a little bit of the new form factor, and then we can get into some examples here. So first and foremost, you're going to see that the navigation menu has changed from something that was anchored to the top of the form to something that's more on the left-hand side. And as we click on this little menu button, you can see that we can expand or contract the menu to see the various descriptions of functional areas. And as you get more familiar with those areas, you probably will find yourself in a minimized state here, knowing that all the while there's hover help that allows you to see those various features and functionality. So let's talk a little bit about the form layout. There's a lot to like here. There is at the top, as you can see, the Search Salesforce. This is a facility that existed in Classic. There are some slight changes. As I click into that, you'll see that there are some recently visited records that show up here, as opposed to that being a breadcrumb trail on the left-hand side. That's now being shown as a drop-down as you click into the global search facility. Right below that, you see this static header file or header section of the form, allowing you to hone in on some details that would have otherwise been relegated down to this Details tab below, which we'll get into. So you have some flexibility on the number and what fields you actually show there in that particular area. As you saw earlier, I clicked on this Details tab, and this allows you to see all the attributes of the record that you're on. In this case, being a contact record, see phone number, home phone, mobile, email, and even the physical address with a map right below. Adjacent to that, we see the related lists, as you were accustomed to seeing inside of the Salesforce Classic experience. These lists are no longer a series of tabs below, but rather kind of card in orientation, card presentation. So that's, I think, a really interesting and consumable way to present the data. And then on the right-hand side, we see kind of an activity center here. We've got the Collaborate piece, which is reflective of Chatter. And then we've got the activity area here, allowing us to see a number of things, including this activity timeline. As I scroll down slightly, you'll see that there are very graphical-oriented way in which to see historical activities, or what we're referring to as past activities, as well as next steps, things that are going to happen in the future. Number of other facilities available here, the ability to filter on those various activities, whether they be calls, emails, events, and so forth. So there's some interesting ways to view that in a filtered fashion. And then there's the ability to go in and add new pieces of correspondence, whether that be a new event, new task, or in this case a new email, which will be an example that we'll provide. This shows also kind of some advances that Salesforce has made with regards to usage of email templates and such, just to speed up some of the blocking and tackling. So in this case, 1 or 2 after a meeting, follow up with a quick touch base email. We just click the email button, and it automatically puts the recipient of that email into the to field. It courtesy copies or blind copies me into that, and then we can fill out the subject line and the body, or we can make use of some handy-dandy templates. And so I've gone in and created a real quick template here to pre-populate both the subject line and the body. You'll see some data tags in there that if we click on the preview button, show how that data tag works, where it brings in the first name of the recipient as well as me as the user, and after having been satisfied with the authoring of that email, I can click on the send button, and now I'm off to my next task. Again, very focused energy, not a whole lot of extra clicking, and all the while it kept me in the context of the record. I wasn't off in some other window or form, but rather focused in on that particular exercise of working with Rick and his correspondence. And so that piece there I wanted to make sure we highlighted. Another great advancement, it's front and center on the screen right here, and that is what they're referring to as enhanced notes. And enhanced notes are really, I'll just open one up and you'll get a sense for what I'm talking about. This is a notes taking 2.0 in Salesforce, where we're now supporting rich text formatting, where we've got the ability for bolding, underlining, italicizing, as well as the insertion of bullets. And so we're getting a little more structure and organization to those notes that we take. We also have the ability to insert images. So for those of you who are Evernote or OneNote users, you're starting to see some of the tools that are available on those platforms now being brought into a relational database in this Salesforce solution. On that note, you're going to see at the top here the ability for us to associate this note to multiple records and record types. Here we have contacts that are related to it as well as a property. And so there's really no limit to how many records you could actually associate a note to. And so that's a really real good advancement. Now, we're seeing this note as it relates to Rick Williams, but to truly make good on the promise of this being somewhat of an Evernote or a OneNote equivalent, we start looking at this from a different vantage point, that being on the main nav, the notepad area, where now in almost a notebook orientation we can see pages of that notebook, that virtual notebook, and one of those was one that we just drilled in on, so that if you want to look at things in a more aggregate fashion, like thumbing through your notebook after a long week worth of note-taking, this is the equivalent of that. And as you can see, tucked away are the related records there that those notes are associated with. So a really great tool, and one that I find to be particularly interesting for those who look at CRM tools for what they are in terms of the basic blocking and tackling. A phenomenal organization tool for activity tracking, but also note tracking, and this really makes good on that promise. So while we're on the note area, let's just show a couple of other ways in which you can insert things like notes and tasks in the middle of work streams. So let's in this case say that we're viewing a list of records here, and we're working through our Salesforce solution, and we wanted to, a thought popped in our head to take a note on a meeting that we had just had. And in this case, we can go to the Global Actions menu and see that from that menu we have the ability to add a new note. And instead of it occupying the entirety of the screen with a new note form and taking us off our focus, it actually just brings this non-obtrusive, what they call composer window, into the lower right-hand corner of the screen, and allows us to go in there and type those meeting minutes or notes, again also being able to quickly relate them to any particular company or contact that we might have desire to do so with. And at this point I can go in and talk about this and that, and we hit done, and now we've got the note taken, it's off our mind, it's committed to the database, but now we're back to where we started with regards to our work stream. So great tools, and I think all this is a wonderful part of the Lightning experience as we go forward. One of the advances that we've made with the AscendixRE product on top of the Lightning platform is the introduction of a product we call DataAmp. It's a tool that's sold separately as a module and plugs right into the AscendixRE solution, and ultimately what it is a reflection of our ongoing commitment to making these tools easier to use. And one of the number one objections we have to people using this is they feel oftentimes like they become data entry clerks and are slaves to the act of entering data into the system. And we all know that garbage in, garbage out, and if you don't put any data in, you don't get anything out of the system. And so one of the things that we've come up with is a strategic partnership with a company called InsideView, who is a market leader in data aggregation of business-to-business data at the company and contact level. And they've aggregated data from, I think, over 40 million sources and pulled all that data and now aggregate it and provide it as a data service that we subscribe to and have now partnered with. And so let me show you what that means to you as an end user. And so in this scenario, we're going to go ahead and enter in a new contact or new account into the system. And this is pretty normal behavior. You would go in there and just type in the name of a company. And after having typed in the name of the company, you'll see on the right-hand side there is a matching process going on in the background with this InsideView database that we brought to bear. And upon finding a match that we feel is appropriate, we simply click on that, and it presents a great deal of information that resides in that data mart that we can then bring into our Salesforce instance. And with a click of a button, we now have sped up the data entry process. And I would argue that not only have we sped it up, but we've also added additional data that we probably would not have taken the time nor had access to. One of those being annual revenue, maybe number of employees, SIC code, and so forth. And when we get some of the advanced searching tools that I'm going to show you in a moment, you'll find that, wow, it's great to have deep and wide data in our database for mining purposes. So as we continue on this example, if we were to just simply click the Save button, we'd now quickly have a new account record entered into our system. Now that data amp product works not only at the account level, but also works at the contact level as well. And so if we scroll down to the contacts related, we can click on the New button, and from there we can type in the name of a contact that we want to put into the system. And so with a little bit of data entry there, putting in the first name and the last name, sure enough, we find that there's a match for Dominic Caruso in the database as well. And by clicking on that record, it allows us to go in there and fill all. And now not only have we created a company record, but we've also created a related contact record, and we as a data entry individual only had to put in 3 pieces of information: the company name and the first and last name of the contact we wanted to enter in, and we were done. And again, done in a really complete way with data that we just simply wouldn't have put in had we had it left to our own devices. So that's data amp, and there's more to it than what we're showing here, but for purposes of speed, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next topic here, which is around inquiry tracking. So inquiries is nothing more than a commercial real estate unqualified indication of interest. It might be a sign call. It might be someone that that you've gotten to know over in a cocktail party or some sort of a social event, and they're not quite qualified in terms of a relationship, and you don't want to have them in the general population of company and contact relationships. So it's akin to a lead in a generic CRM sense, but in this case, we're putting very commercial real estate specific details associated with it. The idea is we want to have a very quick entry form here that allows you to track the bare essentials, certainly the first name and the last name and the company, and perhaps a contact information like the phone number and email. But we don't want to stop down and create a full-blown company and contact record when we don't even know if we're going to be pursuing this relationship going forward. But in addition to those details, we also want to make sure that we capture some of the indications of interest with regards to perhaps being a tenant and or an investor in properties that we are either a broker of or own. And so in this case, it's a lease inquiry, and they've shared with us a few details that we don't want to simply put on a 3M sticky note around our monitor or in some binder, but really leverage our relational database. We can do that mining that we spoke of earlier. And so in this preferences area, which will come up here in a future example, we store the area minimum, so square footage ranges. We also could, if they shared with us, jot down the rate ranges along with required move-in dates and things like the type of property and the class of property they want. And so all those details have now been captured, and we can mine those. So let's fast forward a little bit and say that we've matured this relationship, and now we feel like we want to convert them to a full company and contact record. And for that matter, we might even want to create a deal record so that we can augment our forecast and our deal flow. So you'll see this conversion facility available to us, and with these checkboxes we select those and it pre-populates the data that we've already put in. Again, going back to that, we don't want people to have to put any more data in than they absolutely have to, and so we've benefited from capturing those details at the inquiry level, and then we're leveraging that. And in addition, we're also saying, you know what, we've furthered this relationship along enough to where we can go out there and create a new deal record. And so we say, well, what kind of deal is this going to be? And you saw through the drop-down that there were a number of different types of deals. And moreover, that preference that we just put some time and energy into, the rate range and the square footage, we want to make sure that that carries forward as well. And so after having made those selections, we simply click on the Convert button, and that inquiry that was sitting there in a separate facility is now created records in other aspects of the tool. As you can see here in this connections window, there is an account that's been created, a deal, preference, and contact. And so let's just click through to the Ace Cash Express account record. Again, we see some account insights that are coming through here. We can see in this related lists area that there's a deal that was been spawned, and in addition, the contacts and the preference, all that created on our behalf just using this inquiry conversion process. So a great time saver and a great workflow to help you move along the relationship growth trends in your business practice. So that's the inquiry and tracking conversion tool. The next thing I want to show in this real quick dash through this content is stacking plans. And so we've had stacking plans in the past, but we've advanced them and made them a bit more full-featured here in this release. So we're going to go in there and use the global search to come up with a property, that being Preston Park Financial Center, and we're going to drill into that. And there's a series of action buttons up here at the top, which one of which is the stacking plan. And so for those of you who are new to the AscendixRE solution, we allow for and support the tracking of full lease and availability data associated with a property, and as such it affords us the ability to go in there and create dynamic stacking plans. This is not some file that was attached to the property that just shows up. That was actually rendered based on the data that is inside the system in terms of leases and availabilities based on the date that we see here in this as of field. And that, to that point, we have the ability to roll that date back, and if we wanted to look at what this stack looked like in, say, 2015, if you had the supporting leases in the system at that time, it would reflect a completely different stack, and the same would be true if you fast-forwarded that. So let's take a moment to look at the data that we have here in some of the facilities. So the as-of date we've covered. You'll see that there is an export to Excel and to PDF that's available. So if we wanted to share this stacking plan in an editable format, we'd go push it to Excel. If we wanted to be in a read-only capacity, we'd push it to PDF. We have the ability also for this to end up becoming a user interface and not just a report through the ability to add a new lease and or an availability directly from this particular screen. Go in there, enter the information, and if in fact it applies to this particular date range, that lease would show up in this stacking plan, and the same thing goes for new availability. A couple of other things here. Lastly, the settings option allows you to go in there and dictate what you do and don't want to actually show on the stack, along with the legend below that color codes, the lease expiration date for those various leases on the stack. So new advances there. I wanted to share that with you in this particular webinar. The next thing that I want to cover is what we call quick search. Another word for it we use internally here is extended search. And really what we're doing with quick search is we're solving what we consider to be a gap in some of the tools that are available in the core Salesforce platform, namely around, as you would imagine, searching, but also around view building and reporting. If you think about search for a moment, which we're on right now, search is great for single condition, single criteria searches, like for instance, typing in Williams, I would get records that are related to that word, and it may be that that's an account or contact or a property for that matter, Williams Square in Irving, Texas. But when it comes to multiple conditions, multiple criteria, this search facility actually is not as robust. There are some abilities, but it doesn't allow you to get really granular there. So what most will do if they want to go in and do a multi-conditional search is they'll create a data view. And as we all know who are using the tool, the views are great, and they certainly do support multiple conditions or criteria, but only for that particular record type that you're trying to search on. If it's accounts, you can search for account name, maybe the industry and so forth, but you couldn't search for other related attributes. Let's just give an example, contacts. If I wanted to search for contacts that were related to accounts that were of industry equal to manufacturing, the view would fall short of being able to accommodate that. And in a more commercial real estate specific example, if I wanted to go out there and create a view or a search for all leases that were related to properties that were of type office in the, say 10 miles from the central business district of Dallas, I really wouldn't be able to do that with either the search facility or the view builder. I'd have to go to the reporting facility. And the reporting facility, if you use that, although very powerful and such, when you start getting into building queries that require multiple objects to be involved, for the average user that becomes a bit more complicated than they would like. And so for all those reasons, we've introduced a tool called Quick Search, and here it is today. So for starters, what we've done is we've tried to take the complexity out of searching by anticipating some of the searches that you would conduct on data sets that are commercial real estate in orientation. We've got accounts, we've got contacts, properties, and so forth. And in each of those, there are example layouts, or what we might call query by example layouts of those fields that you might do searches on, some of which are at the contact table, as you see here. But also, we see that we anticipate that you might want to search on attributes related to the parent company that contact's related to. And so if we scroll down, we see that sure enough, there is that ability. And just as a quick example, we can look at the one that I just kind of conveyed to you. Give me all contacts that are related to accounts that have an industry equal to manufacturing. As simple as that seems, there's no way to do that in a view building tool today, nor with the search facility. And so this allows us to conduct such a simple search. Now, here you see a couple of things going on. We've got the result sets. We have the ability to select one or all or many of those records, and then after having selected those, we can take action on them. One of the other things that we saw is that there was no ability with the list view capability to export that to Excel. You have to go and recreate that query in a report to get it to be output to any kind of a reportable format. And so we skip that step altogether and just say, hey, why not go ahead and give you the ability to export from directly this result set here. So that is available. You'll also notice a select column, so if the default set of columns are not what you wish, you can go in there and change those, reorient them. So you'll see that facility here, grabbing fields from the available pile and pulling them over here, and then reordering those on the right-hand side is all available. So that's a quick example of a basic blocking and tackling search for those who are just looking for company and contact data mining. You'll notice that had we that industry field, again, kind of tying all this together, the data amp product brought in the industry for all those enriched records. So if you're not used to using the industry field, know that this is just one other opportunity to mine and slice and dice the data that you have in your database. The preferences that we tracked earlier for that ACE cash express, had we converted that over, which we did, we would be able to see that as a result because that was a lease preference. And if we were to go in and say, you know what, let's negate this, we don't need that to be equal to anything, and we want simply to go in there and say, give me all contacts that have a lease preference, we could click on the search button and we get a result there. And now that renders that result set, and we get this nice tidy little list here. So that's the contact region. Let's talk a little about some examples that might be a bit more applicable from a commercial real estate perspective. So I've got the lease comps, or leases facility available, and you'll see this map here. I didn't really introduce that in the account example, but I will so here. And so in this scenario, and again, just to give you a taste of how powerful this can be without complexity, I can say, you know, I'm looking for all leases that have square footage range anywhere from 10,000 square feet to 15,000, and they need to be in office buildings, and they need to be within a certain radius range of the epicenter of Dallas. And so I anchor that in Dallas, and I pull it out some of the suburbs, and now with the quick selection of that geographic area combined with these options on the left-hand side, I now have conducted a really sophisticated search, but I didn't have to be a PhD in SQL programming to get that done. Moreover, if I wanted to, I could go in there and, like you would with any kind of a report writing tool, you define the query, you get the output, and then you send it to a report. Well, we've already defined the query using both the query by example and the mapping tool, and now we can go in there and modify the actual layout. Perhaps I want to go in there and put the record type for properties in here. I can go in and grab that information as well and drag it over here just to kind of reaffirm that the filter worked, that only those that were of type office would actually show up. And with a quick selection there, we see now that we've got the property, and alongside that the property record type is visible as well. And again, selecting those, hitting the export to Excel, quickly goes out, does the export for you, and now you've got effectively a report that you could go in and share with others and color code and manipulate. And I'm just showing you one that has raw data. Imagine doing this with deal data and other things to do a little bit of number crunching. So I want to leave you with the impression that this is a supercharged search facility, but it's more than that. It's a beginning, candidly, of a report writing tool. So we'll talk more about that in some of the Q&A, I'm sure, as we field some of your questions. So in closing, a few things on this. Allows you to search across objects, which you really can't do effectively without reporting. Allows you to include columns from multiple tables instead of just the one that you've done the search on. We didn't really touch on it, but you can save these views as well. Here we have a view that I had already created, office leases between 10 and 15,000 square feet in the Dallas area, and so that's saved search and allows you to go in there and re-render that particular search against the database. So save searching, obviously the use of mapping for searching, and lastly, and maybe very important, is the ability for someone who is not an administrator to go in there and modify some of these templates. So let's say that I were doing a search on property data, and I just so happen to want to search on the with the criteria of property class has got to be equal to only A properties. And so I click on this plus button, and it immediately presents me this search facility, at which point I go in and type in property class, and it makes that available to me to select from, and at which point it augments the query by example form, thus immediately allowing me to access the pick list and use that as a criteria for my search. And so non-programming, empowering the end user, modification of the query by example form is also part of this. And then lastly, the exporting to Excel. So powerful tool. I kind of dashed through that, and we can certainly handle questions after this webinar on other details around it. The next topic is around relationships. I'm sure that many of you on the phone here are looking at a tool like this and may or may not be the only user of that tool. And if you're like most, we call on the same contacts and the same companies on a fairly regular basis, and oftentimes without proper reflection of that in a centralized database, we can have blind spots on what our corporate strength is in terms of relationship with a particular company or account. And so to kind of put more light on that and put more visibility to it, we've created this relationships facility. And you can see that here we have two users of this program that both have a relationship with the account Bottle Rocket Apps. And now if I walk into this account, I know now that, yes, I have them as a client, but I'm now knowledgeable of the fact that Ross, who just works down the hall from me, looks at this account as a prospect. Now that's okay because we're not in the same department, but I definitely would be wise to know that he's trying to call on them, and the reverse way, Ross would be wise to know what I've been communicating with them and so forth. And so this relationships facility is available, and you can see we've got a nifty little calibration here to kind of indicate the strength of the relationship, kind of relative strength there. And this relationships facility exists not only at the account level, but you have the ability to see this at the contact level as well. The last topic that I want to cover on this as we move briskly along, and I try to stay as true to the 30-minute window as possible, is around our support of multifamily properties. Now, for those of you who've been on past demonstrations, you probably saw that we had some support for multifamily, but we've extended that support, and now we have the ability to track unit mix. And so adjacent to the details tab is this related tab, and within the related tab you'll see a number of data points, one of which now is unit profiles. And so in this example for Amley at the ballpark, we have a number of units distributed through these different profiles. We've got 2 2s, 3 2s, and 1 1s, and we see the quantity of each of them and the unit area for each of those. And if we wanted to look at what the details for a particular unit profile are, you see them as follows here. We've got the profile name, the market rent date, the upstream property it's related to, of course, the number of units, how many are occupied, vacant, what's the area, and then it calculates the total area based on the quantity and the unit area. It also tells you of the portfolio, what percentage is made up of the 3 2s in this case, along with the rent profile below. So not only do we support the rent for today, but also a market rent history that is usually of importance when tracking these multifamily properties. And so that's something that we brought here recently to market, and I wanted to share that with you on this webinar. So I've covered a lot of ground in a short period of time, and I imagine that there are some questions that I've left unanswered at this point. So what I'm going to do at this point is hand it over to Camille and see if we can't address some of those questions for you. So Camille, I'll hand it back on to you.
Okay, and I've received some questions via chat, but just note that there's also the Q&A window that you can use on the panel if you have a question. So I received, what if an employee doesn't want to use the new interface? Or if someone to do Lightning and someone to stick with Classic, how does that work?
So that's completely supported. You have the ability to pick and choose there. As a matter of fact, if somebody were to, say, start off on Lightning but wanted to convert back to Classic for some reason, they'd have the ability to do that. So they're not restricting that. Of course, that is something that's in control, that's being controlled by Salesforce. That's supported today, and down the road we'll see if they continue to do that and for how long.
Okay, and then if I'm creating the email in Salesforce, is it still going to show up in my sent box in Outlook?
So interesting that you asked that question. With the exercise that I showed you, you're actually not even getting into Exchange or Outlook. You're using the Salesforce mail server there. However, with the summer release in 16, they're going to allow for you to use your own mail service. And when you do that, you effectively still have the same experience there, but you are actually leveraging those constructs in the background and thus giving you the ability to see the sent items and so forth. So that's something that is going to be a part of the summer release, but not something that I demonstrated here today. Today what I showed you was the Salesforce inherent email client. So, but good question, and yes, that will be supported when they allow for that native email client to be embedded into the interface.
Okay. And then a current client asked if Quick Search is part of the solution or sold separately.
So if you are a Foundations user, it is not part of the solution. This is part of our Enterprise edition of the solution. And so for those who are interested in looking at that and a potential upgrade, please reach out to Camille or myself and we can talk to you about it. But it is part of the solution, but if you have to subscribe to the Enterprise edition and not the Foundations for that.
Okay, and then I should have actually merged this question with that one, but it's when or why would you use Quick Search instead of the reporting tool itself that comes with Salesforce?
Yeah, so I guess two vantage points there. The end user experience, I think what we've done is we've taken a lot of the sophistication and complexity out of building queries in those templates that you saw, and make that much easier for the end user to understand and to actually accommodate that query. So I think that's where the quick search comes in. If it's just a standard, banded report or you want to dump it to Excel, that's a perfect solution for you. If there is more advanced report writing needs that require charts and graphs and some groupings, that may be, and you're not an average user but have a bit more of a technical background, then the reporting tool is certainly there for you as well. But for our money, I think the majority of the end users will find that the quick search facility is going to end up becoming a bit of a replacement for not only view building but also report writing.
Okay. And then let's do this one. Can I do on-the-fly searches without having to save views?
Yeah, it's interesting. Someone clearly is a user of the system. One of the things that I found as we were going through the research is if I had something more than a single criteria search, I really had no facility to do on-the-fly searches. I was really required to go in there and create a new view, and I may or may not wanted to save that view. I was just curious as to whether or not my database contained certain records that met that criteria, and so you don't have that ability in Salesforce today at all if it goes beyond the bounds of the global search. With the quick search, you can do that all day long. That's what it was made for, not only to save the searches, but on the fly, or what we'll call ad hoc searches, where you just have an idea. Let's go see who fits this bill, and you get the result sets. Then you can choose to save them or not. So I think that's a great point there, and really one of the core tenets of design for us in the quick search.
Okay. And we had a couple of people show up late, and somebody had asked if they would be able to access this full recording. Yes, you will. We will be emailing you a link to rewatch this content. We'll be sending you a handout as well that kind of has an outline of this information, as well as what's coming up in the summer releases, and I'm sure we'll have a webinar at that point too. Another quick reminder, like it was advertised, should you become a client in the next 6 months, we'll be giving you 500 free credits to use in DataAmp, and if you're an existing client, we'll be giving you credits should you refer somebody who becomes a client. Right now, I think that's all we have for questions. Wes, I'll let you wrap it up, and just in case somebody has another one, you've still got time to get it in under the wire.
Yeah, I guess the only thing else that wasn't asked, but maybe the unasked question that everybody would want to know the answer to, and that is, it's important to note that this advancement by Salesforce to Lightning is a step in the direction that they first took through their mobile solution. So anybody who's used the Salesforce One mobile solution, you saw a slightly different experience on the mobile solution than you did with the classic. Well, if you now reflect back on the way that that was all laid out, you're now seeing that, oh, I see, they're marrying these two experiences up. They're not apples and apples, but they're very close in terms of what you can do on a mobile device versus what you can do now with the Salesforce Lightning. So I think that's good, especially for people who like harmony in the desktop and the mobile. And so this just takes you closer to that harmonious position between the two platforms. So, in that closing comment.
Well, and wait, Wes, we have
yep,
one more question actually.
Yep, go ahead.
Somebody asked, sorry if I missed it, can I upgrade to Lightning now?
So if you are a subscriber, then absolutely you have the ability to convert over. I would suggest, though, that we have a conversation so that you're not just kind of put out to the new product without a little bit of ropes course, if you will. There is a reorientation to where things are and so forth, but absolutely there's the ability to flip that over. It's part of the platform. There are about 2, maybe 3 steps that you have to go through to get that done, but let us know and we'll help guide you through that process.
Okay. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for your time. Appreciate it. And if there are questions that come to you after we hang up, please feel free to reach out to Camille or myself. Like she mentioned, there's a recording, and there'll be a nice, I think handouts have already been made available to you through the the facilities there in GoToMeeting, but we've got some nice supporting documentation that kind of plants some of these ideas and in the ground and allows them to germinate for you. So, hey, I appreciate your time. I'm glad the weather held off. The lightning strikes behind us didn't make a power outage out here, and we
Exactly.
were able to have the full recording. So, thanks again for your time, and look forward to hearing from you. And we'll be communicating our next webinar series topic here in the near future. Thanks much.
Thanks, Wes. Bye-bye.